The Lotus Method. How to stay disciplined without burnout. Most people believe discipline is supposed to hurt. That if you're not tired, stressed, or exhausted, you're not doing it right. But here's the shocking psychological truth. The more pain you attach to discipline, the faster your brain learns to avoid it. Think about that. What if burnout isn't a personal failure but a biological response? What if your mind isn't weak? It's protecting you. Psychologists have discovered something uncomfortable. The human brain does not respond well to force for long periods. It obeys briefly, then it rebels. Quietly at first, missed days, lost focus. Then one day, everything collapses, the routine dies, motivation disappears, and you're left wondering why discipline never sticks. Here's the mystery no one talks about. Why do some people stay disciplined for years, calm, focused, consistent, while others burn bright and crash hard? Why do some routines feel light, almost natural, while others feel like a daily war against yourself? The answer isn't willpower, it isn't hustle, and it definitely isn't pushing harder. Your brain is not designed to survive constant pressure. It's designed to grow through balance, through rhythm, through reward. When discipline feels like punishment, your nervous system flags it as danger. And once something feels dangerous, the mind will find a way out: procrastination, distraction, burnout. But what if discipline didn't feel like pressure at all? What if it grew quietly like a lotus rising through mud, untouched by the chaos around it? In this video, you'll uncover a different approach. A psychological method that works with your brain instead of against it. A way to stay disciplined without burning out, without self-hate, without exhaustion. Because the strongest discipline isn't loud, it's calm. And once you understand why, you'll never force yourself the same way again. Discipline is everywhere. In every goal you set, every habit you try to build, every promise you make to yourself and quietly break. And yet no one really teaches us how discipline is supposed to feel. We're only taught how it's supposed to look: early mornings, strict routines, constant pressure. But here's the problem. When discipline becomes a fight, something inside you slowly shuts down. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack ambition, but because the human mind was never built to live under nonstop force. This matters more than we realize. Burnout isn't just exhaustion, it's emotional numbness. It's losing interest in things that once mattered. It's waking up already tired of the day ahead. And for many people, burnout begins the moment discipline turns into self-punishment. Psychology explains this clearly. The brain doesn't separate productive pain from danger. Stress is stress. When pressure becomes constant, your nervous system enters survival mode. Focus drops, creativity fades, motivation disappears, discipline collapses, not all at once but slowly, silently. That's why so many people quit routines they once felt proud of. Not because they failed, but because the method failed them. So here's the real question this video explores. What if discipline didn't have to feel heavy? What if consistency didn't require suffering? What if the brain could be trained to want effort instead of resisting it? This is where the Lotus Method begins. Not as a productivity trick, not as another motivation hack, but as a psychological shift, one that aligns discipline with how the human mind actually works. By the end of this video, you'll understand the hidden reason discipline breaks people, and the quiet principle that allows it to last without burnout. Discipline usually begins with hope, a new routine, a fresh start, a promise that this time will be different. At first, everything feels strong. You wake up early. You push through resistance. You tell yourself pain means progress. And for a while, it works. But slowly, something changes. The routine starts to feel heavier. Small tasks feel harder than they should. You hesitate before starting. You bargain with yourself. One skipped day turns into two. Then guilt appears, and guilt turns discipline into a burden. This is where most people blame themselves. They say they lack willpower. They think they're inconsistent. They believe they're not disciplined enough. But psychology tells a different story. The human brain is not wired for constant pressure. When effort is fueled only by force, the mind interprets it as a threat. It activates stress responses. Cortisol rises, mental energy drains faster than it can recover. What once felt motivating now feels suffocating. Yet society praises this struggle. We celebrate burnout as dedication. We admire people who push past exhaustion. And without realizing it, we teach ourselves that discipline must hurt to matter. Here's the unanswered question. If discipline is supposed to improve life, why does it often make people feel worse? Why does something meant to create freedom end up creating fatigue? The problem isn't discipline itself. It's the way it's built. Most routines are constructed on punishment, fear, and pressure. Miss a day and you punish yourself, fall behind and you shame yourself. Over time, discipline becomes associated with emotional pain, and the brain remembers. Without you noticing, your mind starts avoiding the very habits you claim to want. Not out of weakness, but out of self-protection. This is the tension at the heart of discipline. The harder you push, the more resistance grows. And until this hidden conflict is understood, discipline will always feel like a battle against yourself. This is where psychology reveals the real conflict. Discipline doesn't fail because people stop trying. It fails because the brain quietly turns against the method being used. When effort is driven by pressure, the nervous system shifts into survival mode. And in survival mode, the brain's priority is not growth, it's escape. Dopamine plays a critical role here. Contrary to popular belief, dopamine isn't the reward itself. It's the anticipation of reward. When effort is paired with meaning, progress, or satisfaction, dopamine rises. Motivation feels natural. But when effort is paired only with stress, fear of failure, or self-criticism, dopamine drops. The brain learns that effort equals discomfort with no payoff. At this point, resistance becomes automatic. You don't consciously choose procrastination. Your brain chooses it for you. Distraction becomes relief. Rest feels safer than action. And discipline starts to feel emotionally expensive. This creates a vicious cycle. You push harder to compensate. You tighten the routine, you remove flexibility. But the more rigid the system becomes, the faster burnout accelerates. What began as self-improvement turns into self-conflict. Psychologists call this motivational collapse. The turning point comes when one realization breaks through the noise. Discipline cannot survive on force alone. The human mind is designed to repeat what feels safe, rewarding, and identity-aligned. When discipline feels like punishment, the brain will sabotage it every time. This is where most systems fail. They try to control behavior without addressing emotion. They demand consistency without providing psychological safety. And as long as discipline is framed as control instead of cooperation, the internal conflict will never end. But once this mechanism is understood, a new possibility opens. Discipline doesn't need more pressure. It needs a different foundation. Here is the revelation most people never hear. Discipline is not about control, it's about association. Your brain doesn't ask, "Is this good for me?" It asks, "How does this make me feel?" And this is where everything changes. The Lotus Method is built on one psychological truth. The brain repeats what feels safe, rewarding, and meaningful. Just like a lotus grows upward without forcing the water apart, discipline grows naturally when it's rooted in calm, not pressure. Instead of punishing missed days, the Lotus Method focuses on returning without shame. Instead of demanding maximum effort, it rewards consistency over intensity. Instead of relying on motivation spikes, it builds identity. I am someone who shows up, even on low-energy days. This is the moment discipline becomes quiet. Effort stops feeling like resistance. Action no longer requires emotional negotiation. You begin to crave progress not because you're forcing yourself, but because your brain associates effort with stability and self-respect. Neuroscience supports this shift. When stress is reduced, dopamine regulation improves. The nervous system exits survival mode, focus deepens. Discipline becomes sustainable because it no longer threatens your emotional balance. This is the aha moment. Burnout was never the price of ambition. It was the result of misaligned psychology. True discipline is gentle, not brutal. Structured, not rigid. Consistent, not exhausting. Once discipline stops attacking the nervous system, the brain stops fighting back. What emerges is a form of discipline that feels calm, grounded, and self-trusting. And that's the hidden truth. The strongest discipline doesn't feel like pressure, it feels like alignment. Once this truth settles in, discipline no longer feels mysterious or cruel. It starts to make sense. What you've been fighting wasn't laziness or a lack of ambition, it was a system that ignored human psychology. The Lotus Method reveals something deeper about human nature. We grow best when we feel safe. We stay consistent when effort doesn't threaten our emotional balance. The mind is not a machine to be forced, but a system to be understood. When discipline is rooted in calm, the aftermath is subtle but powerful. You stop fearing missed days. You stop seeing rest as failure. Progress becomes something you return to, not something you escape from. Over time, trust forms between you and your own mind, and that trust changes everything. This approach doesn't make discipline weaker. It makes it sustainable. Instead of burning energy in cycles of pressure and collapse, effort becomes steady, quiet, reliable. Goals no longer feel heavy because they're no longer built on self-punishment. Psychologically, this shift reduces internal conflict, less guilt, less resistance, more clarity, more follow-through. Discipline stops being an emotional drain and starts becoming a stabilizing force in daily life. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: you don't need to become harsher to improve. You need to become wiser. When you work with your brain instead of against it, discipline stops breaking you. It starts supporting you. And that's when growth lasts, not for weeks, but for years. Discipline was never meant to feel like suffering. It was meant to create freedom. The moment you stop forcing yourself and start understanding yourself, everything changes. Discipline becomes something you return to, not something you run from. And the Lotus Method reminds us of a simple truth: growth doesn't come from pressure. It comes from alignment. You don't need more motivation. You don't need harsher rules. You need a system that respects how your mind actually works. So here's the call to action. Stop punishing yourself for being human. Start building discipline that feels calm, consistent, and sustainable. Let progress be quiet. Let effort be gentle. Trust that showing up again and again is enough. Try one small shift today. Reduce the pressure, remove the guilt. Focus on returning, not proving. Watch how your relationship with discipline changes when it stops feeling like a threat. Because the strongest discipline isn't loud. It doesn't burn you out. It grows silently, like a lotus through water. And if this changed how you see discipline, stay with this journey. Because once you understand how your brain responds to safety, you'll be ready to uncover what it does when purpose finally replaces pressure.